everything. I forgot totally. My brother say he love me, I love him too. My man call me honey, I call him boo. But my neighbor no like me, I hate him too. A man call me stupid, I call him fool. Cause I forgot how to love the way you asked me to. Remind me how to la 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 la, to la 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 la. I forgot how to give those who are in me, so selfish of me. Even when it got too hard for me to care, I forgot how to try. My baby says she hungry, I give her food. I tell her I will do anything for you. But a stranger say, please, I no get you. I look up like this, say, who are you? Cause I forgot how to love the way you asked me to. Remind me how to la 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 la, to la 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 la. I forgot. Joromi, I want you to love me. Joromi, baby. Joromi, Joro.
So I'd like to welcome everyone back for the opening ceremony right now. But I'd like to invite Professor Ogunbile and Professor Taiwo Shone, who will be anchoring this session. Professor.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will welcome you to the 8th edition of IFE Institute of Advanced Studies, holding here at Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. And we believe that our online participants are already set. And so, to begin, we call some people to the high table so that they will direct the affairs of this program. So I want to call on Emeritus Professor Togonubi Kestet, who is a former Pro-Chancellor of the Federal University of Gusau, and currently a Pro-Chancellor of Brandon Kebbi, So you come to the high table, man. Thanks very much. Thanks very much. Thanks very much. Thanks very much. Let's continue to clap. Let's continue to clap.
Okay. The next person that will be inviting to the raised table is Professor Eyitope Ogunbodede. He is the immediate past Vice Chancellor of Obafemi Awolowo University. Welcome. The next person is the convener and founder of the Ife Institute. Sometimes it's very difficult to know how to call him because we call him Daddy. He's more than a daddy. It's my pleasure to invite Professor Jacob K. Olupano to the table. Welcome, Daddy. We often say that beside a successful man is always a woman. Maybe not, but in this case, it is. So the next person that I would like to invite to the front here is Mrs. Josephine Olupano. Mama, welcome, ma. Another person that we would like to invite to this table, who has been with us from the very beginning, is Professor Oyeniyi Okunoye, the Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Obafemi Awolowo University. Is he here? Professor Oyeniyi Okunoye. When he comes, he will join. Oh, he's here. Thank you, Prof. Welcome again, welcome. Okay. Welcome, Prof. Welcome. Okay. Let us very quickly recognize the Vice Chancellor, substantive Vice Chancellor of Obafemi Awolowo University in absentia. We hope that he will join us soon. And that is Professor Simeon Bamire. He will join us soon. I'd like to congratulate everyone for being here. IIAS is a continuous convocation of scholars, technocrats, academics, and all those that are passionate about adding value to our world. Thank you again for being here. We welcome every one of you. Because we would like our video coverage to look excellent, at least to be very good, we want to plead that those of us behind, especially on the blue seats, should please move forward. Please rise and come forward to fill the spaces in front and the red seats. You are important. Everyone is important. We value you. We value your time. We value your decision to be with us. Please rise. Thank you. Thank you. Fill the red seats. Thank you very much. We still have some spaces in front here. There are seats. Please come. Thank you. So when others come, they will sit behind. So, fellow facilitators on site, welcome again and again. Those of them joining us in the virtual space, especially the keynote speaker, we welcome you very warmly, Professor Adeko. When others come, we will recognize them. So the next item on the agenda.
So we're going to rise while we sing the Nigeria's national anthem. Nigeria, we hail thee. Let us rise. Yes. 1, 2. Now. Our own native land, no tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigeria tall and proud to serve our sovereign motherland. Our flag shall be our symbol, that truth and justice reign. In peace, power to honor, and peace become as gain. To hand unto our children, our banner we obtain. Oh God of all creation, grant this our one request. Help us to build a nation where no man is oppressed. And so with peace and plenty, Nigeria shall be blessed. Thank you. Shall we have our seats?
So thank you. The next item is the convener's remarks. And that we will now invite Professor Jacob Olupo for his remarks.
Hello. Hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello. Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction and greetings to all of us. I greet the Vice Chancellor in absentia, Professor Simeon Bamire, who is our host, for, of course, accepting to have us here on campus. And I also greet his principal officers, our professors, our administrators, our students, and friends of the Institute. I welcome all our facilitators and our professors connected with the Institute for Advanced Studies for taking the time to come to this assembly. And I also welcome our fellows, the past fellows, and the young scholars who will become fellows soon. I thank our friends and our family and relations for their support. We are very grateful to the MasterCard Foundation who has supported us, and the Michael and Henry thank our advisory board, all our facilitators and professors who made it possible to write the grant and submit it to MasterCard Foundation. It's a labor of love. And we deeply appreciate your work and what you have done to keep the Institute going. We're hoping that these next 2 weeks will bring about significant progress and results in the work of the AIS. And for those who happened to be here earlier today when the young scholars read their report, you could see AIS in action. Not only are these scholars from different parts of Africa to confirm that this is not just a Nigerian project, but you see how interdisciplinary the research they presented have been. I was taken aback that, in fact, we saw STEM in action. And yet, you could see the relationship between the humanities. This is what we stand for. And this is indeed somehow the theme of this year's meeting. So as the convener, it is my honor to welcome all of you to INFE Institute and to celebrate the 8th anniversary of the Institute.
And as we begin this year's institute, permit me to offer a brief reflections on the theme of the Institute's concerns and program this year: building communities of practice, interdisciplinary collaboration, and academic leadership. I know when we hear a keynote speaker, Professor Adeko, you'll be able to do better work exploring this thing, all of you. Communities of practice may refer to an academic group committed to applying their research endeavors to solving pressing issues in our society. In other words, communities of practice in our own context seek to produce knowledge that advances the common good. Communities of practice see the public not only as an audience, but also as an essential stakeholder and as co-creator of knowledge. In the Western academy, the idea of research speaking to the general public is becoming fashionable. But I want to remind us all here that communities of practice itself stem from indigenous ways of knowing in Africa. Traditional communities across the continent pursued knowledge that was both theoretical and practical. Indigenous epistemology located knowledge in the people and created knowledge that could serve their communities and their well-being. I return to this age-old philosophy of communities of practice because now more than ever before, we as researchers must remember our sacred trust and share responsibilities to explore the existential issues we are faced with. And as Africans, we are faced with a lot of issues. I recently heard from those in corridors of power that even the concern with food security and security also that relates to more physical things due to the violence that we have experienced in our society, this is a major concern. The Youth Institute of Advanced Studies aspires to live up to its name as a community of practice. With diligent research and thoughtful collaboration, I believe we can reach their status, both as individual researchers and as a collective. So the first step then in becoming a community of practice is valuing and cultivating interdisciplinary scholarship. In the past, in our villages, towns, and districts, we unite to produce solutions to critical issues facing our communities. We could see recently how the traditional rulers are sending town criers to the markets to advise and warn the traders to stop hiking prices of goods. This was the practice in the olden days. The core of it, as reflected in the theme of our conference, is interdisciplinary collaboration, which is essential at this epoch of scholarly history we live in today, because it helps scholars navigate the unprecedented global crisis, to tackle complex problems and identify strong theoretical frameworks for analyzing changes that have an impact on the health and well-being of society at large. And I'm tempted to go into a deeper analysis of this, but I don't want to do the work of the keynote speaker or him. But let us recognize that, in essence, when various disciplinary scholars pool resources together and collaborate, it ensures scholarly and societal success. And pulling scholarly resources together, of course, in collaboration, networking, mentoring, and service is the aim of this institute. And I want to thank all our professors, including those who are here and those who are listening to us in Europe and America and other African countries. We are deeply grateful for the work they have done. And that we hope that together we will reach their destiny. Our goal being to build a mini campus where we will have all our resources and all our things placed so that we don't continue to spend millions of naira trying to even rent spaces to hold this meeting. I'll talk about our model of the Institute of Advanced Studies later on, before I sit down. The focus on interdisciplinary studies, as you know, is not new. But we also realize that as the world becomes hyper-connected and highly complex, it is evident that no single discipline can resolve or respond to its impact on every society, and hence the need for interdisciplinary research. And interdisciplinary research transcends the scope of single research. A high premium is placed on interdisciplinary research as a response to this crisis and the call to respond, of course, to the needs of the society. I may mention that in my own place where I work at Harvard University, it is not unusual now for undergraduate students to have what they call double major, both in science, in humanities, and social sciences. They do both. And what we also realize is that by the time they get to their final year and they are challenged to write what they call the honors thesis, they come up with topics that we really consider to be pretty interdisciplinary in nature and in outlook. So the time has come for us to begin to rethink our own curriculum, to rethink how we do scholarship, and to rethink how we even advise our students. If I tell you, and you probably know this, that it's possible for you to do African studies and religion as undergraduate, and after that, to go for medicine. There's no hindrance in that. We haven't reached that in African countries, at least Nigeria, but we hope that we'll get there. Permit me to comment on the nature of our enterprise, the Institute of Advanced Studies. As most of you probably know, there are very different models of institutes of advanced studies. You have several that are located in reputable universities, such as the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, or University of Stellenbosch in South Africa. You also have several that are located outside the university, such as the Institute of Advanced Studies at Princeton which is just built next to the university, but administratively not part of Princeton. We chose the latter to build our Institute of Advanced Studies outside the university, but to be in partnership with the university, so that we'll be able to maintain our independence, but at the same time, be able to impact what is going on campus here. This is the model we are following. And even though we signed an MOU with the OAU, we need to strengthen that because it's a weak MOU. And I'm glad the former Vice Chancellor is here listening to me. He was on seat when we did that. But for us to be able to maintain this partnership in a meaningful way, it is important for us to revisit that and to strengthen it so that OAU will continue to benefit from what we are doing. We recognize that it's a sizable number of fellows in attendance, those in the past and those at the present. They're also from OAU. There's a need for us to do that. I want to thank them for the support that they give, and particularly the former Vice Chancellor, Professor Morede, who really supported us and gave me virtually everything I asked for when he was Vice Chancellor. Let me also warn you before you continue to clap that we're both of us are from Forward. So it's my kinsman. All right. You understand what I'm talking about. Okay. So as we commence the 8th year of this institute, it is my hope that by the time we turn 10, that's in 2 years' time, we would have constructed a reputable mini campus of ours where we are going to operate. And I'm glad to inform you that the 10-acre piece of land where the institute is housed is indeed under construction. Beginning with the fencing of the property. This group will visit the site on Saturday so that you see it for yourself. This year, we have 70 early research scholars, doctoral and postdoctoral scholars who are gathered here in Ile-Ife. And we have over 100 attending the 2-week training online. Let me apologize to those online who wanted to be here in person. We find out that given the resources we have and the space, it is not possible to make it happen. But we know why they would prefer to be here in person than to be online. We hope that when we get to where we really want to get to, there will be no reason to really attend it online. We'll all be there together. And we'll have what we need, of course, to cater to all. In conclusion, let me thank Professor Adeko, the keynote speaker, who will be speaking after my remark. And let me also state that this generation of young scholars is challenged to begin to reflect on critical theories and ideas that cut across disciplinary boundaries, so that together you can build on and surpass the formidable interdisciplinary work and scholarship that earlier African scholars and others have produced. And seeing these amazing young scholars I teach, and those of you who are here present, I am confident we are up to this task and this challenge. I thank all you all, and I thank particularly members of my own family and my wife who is seated here, Josephine Mutupo Lukonat, for making our dream a reality. And to share a family secret too, we were talking a few months ago before I came. And when I told them, I told my children, you know, I would like to probably maybe put my retirement money and building an institute. They looked at me and I said, I think they realized how passionate I am about this. And I believe that with the help of God, we are going to get there. We will get what we need to build the mini campus. I thank all the professors, particularly those of them who were my former students, even here, and who have now become my colleagues that I am proud of. I am blessed, honestly. I'm totally blessed. I know that. And now your generations of scholars who are coming on board, we join this line of scholars who are really distinguished and found all over the world because we want the best for you. This is why we are here. This is why we are here. And I thank especially our friends who have come from US to see what we are doing here and to begin to dialogue with us and how best they can help us and assist us in raising the money we need to build the institute. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Olufemi. The convener. We hope to recognize all our fellows and facilitators individually. We hope to do that. Maybe not now, because we are eager to have that exchange is important. For now, it's almost impossible for us to summarize the convener's remarks. It's always difficult because every word counts. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. You understand. So now we'll go to very quickly to the very most important aspect of the opening, and that's going to be the keynote address by distinguished Professor Adeleke Adeko. But we would want to have a brief citation of Professor Adeleke Adeko by Dr. Kehinde Mary Bello. Dr. Mary Bello, welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Humbly standing on existing protocol. I think our lecture is Professor. So I'll be taking an informative abstract of the CV of Professor Adeleke Adeko. Professor Adeleke Adeyefo is a humanities distinguished professor in English, African American and African Studies Department for Ohio State University. His education background. He possesses a Bachelor of Arts in English from Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Nigeria. Great. A Master's of Arts in English, Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Nigeria. Then a PhD from University of Florida, Gainesville, in 1991. His teaching and research interests are Yoruba literature, literary theory, African American literature, and Anglophone literatures of Africa, South Asia, and the Caribbean. He is the author of Proverbs, Sexuality, and Nativity in African Literature, and the Slaves' Rebellion. He gets edited a special edition. He gets edited a special issue of Research in African Literature on writing about slavery in the African diaspora. His ongoing research projects are animist, poetic in African American poetry, and praise culture in Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you. You're probably muted.
Am I? Okay.
Welcome, Prof.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
We
Thank
can.
you. So I can start now.
Yes.
All right.
Please do. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the welcoming introduction. Last night, Dr. Woye emailed me for a citation, and I replied to him that I do not have one. Then she said, okay, it will be all right. Well, I'll refer to citation very soon in some of my remarks. To start with, I wanted to use a statement by Chinua Achebe in one of his village novels to the effect that the world is like a mask dancing. The world is like a mask dancing. If you want to see it well, you do not stand in one place. The world is like a mask dancing. If you want to see it well, you do not stand in one place. That's a self-critical, self-examining, self-conscious statement about discovery, which speaks directly to one of the points Professor Lupona was making earlier about communities of practice, intellectual and academic communities of practice. If it is well done on the African continent, it must adopt a long historical perspective. And that's why I started with that quote, which some will call a proverb. But first things first, I do not have slides because I think it distracts. Those things distract, especially when you are speaking remotely. So I'll be reading from the screen my prepared talk. Professor Banire, the Vice Chancellor, Professor Lupano, Professor Dogame, and all participants in this year's Institute of Advanced Studies. I greet you all. First things deserve to be served first. I regret that I could not be there with you in the flesh. When I spoke at one of last year's sessions, Professor Lupono promised that the Institute will ask me back to speak to the whole gathering this year. He kept his word. I thank you, Professor Lupono. I started planning to be there at IFE. I even secured the travel funds. I still have them. Yes, I did. What happened? Well, a student taught me many years back that in Kenya, they urge you to tell God your plans so that they can laugh at them. I've never been to Kenya, but I've interacted with many Kenyans, and nobody has denied the truth of that statement. Tell God your plans so that he can laugh at them. Why? Well, how else will humans learn to be humans if their plans could not be laughed at by somebody else? You could say things turned Kenyan for me earlier this year. The past 4 months get as a B, as you say in Nigerian English. Still, I thank Professor Lupono for staying with me. I really, really appreciate you, Ojogwagba. I also thank Dr. Oweye for his threading the needle of organizing this year's institute with so much care and attention. Dr. Oweye followed up with me constantly to ensure my participation. Both men, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, did not know that one deeply held wish of mine is that may the situation never arise that I shall not be able to answer the call of speaking at IFE. Second, I want to congratulate participants at this year's institute and urge them to secure all they are going to learn over the next couple of weeks in the hollow of their left palms, as we say in southwestern Nigeria. Finally, I seek from this audience the indulgence to acknowledge my sister, Professor Kehinde Ajieko Taiwo, one of the academic leaders of this great campus. One day, I always pray, using the words of the late Professor Michera Mugo of Kenya, that one day our sun shall rise in its proper east and set in its proper west. One day. This year's institute pleads for creating know-how, for creating and nurturing and fostering know-how communities. Another term we're using for intellectual communities, academic communities, for creating know-how communities that are bound by and committed to motions, actions, thoughts, and words, what we call practices, that carry across traditional disciplinary and professional boundaries. In addressing these terms, I chose to present before the Institute a discussion of activities that bind us as academics and professionals. I'm going to speak first about discovery and invention, then working with description and prescription as implements of discovery and invention. I seek to urge Institute participants to be self-conscious and constantly self-aware about the interconnectedness of academic work. So I'm using 4 terms here today: discovery, invention, prescription, and description. And I'll try to connect all the 4 together. I propose to speak about discovery and invention as 2 main goals of intellectual life: discovery and invention as two main goals of intellectual life, teaching or pedagogy as part and parcel of both. I intend to outline the itineraries of prescription and description, thick or thin, how these circumscribe intellectual life. In case you are wondering, what about leadership? A major word a major key term in this year's institute. The idea of leadership that I favor and which I recommend foregrounds not individuals or titularies, both of which could be occultic and anchored in motions of ill-defined charisma. I favor practice-defined formations. I prefer and I recommend the idea of leadership as practice-defined formations that function inherently in pursuit of well-defined discoveries and invention goals. Let me repeat that. I prefer and I recommend the idea of leadership built around practice-defined formations that function coherently in the pursuit of well-defined discoveries and invention goals. I will also place before this gathering my thoughts on the character of interdisciplinary work and how contemporary African academic institutions, as occasions for practice, institutions serving or viewed as occasions for practice, might organize activities. My illustrations will be drawn from my teaching, research, and academic leadership of departments and to a few continents and at all levels of education from elementary school to the highest level over the past 35 years. Let me talk about invention and discovery first. Academic work treads two broad and yet connected pathways. One, fabrication and installation. We fabricate and install things and processes that hitherto do not exist. We also gestate speculative thoughts. You don't need to look too far for an example. What we are doing here is an invention, is an academic work. Professor Lupono and the Institute and Professor Dogame and others are trying to fabricate and install things and processes that hitherto do not exist. Speculative thoughts being part of it. The second thing we do as academics, the second path that academic work treads is to locate, one might say, to find and uncover new things. These we generally call discoveries. So two things, we invent, that is, we fabricate and install. Then two, we locate, that is, we find and uncover new things. I could say a little more. Inventions are wrought, they are created from different disparate existing elements, oftentimes with existing instruments. And they are attributed to workings, inventions are attributed to the workings of a mindful, creative, active, and restless exercise of will, which many of us call witchcraft or miracle. Inventions, I'm saying, are wrought from, are created from disparate existing elements, sometimes with existing equipment and instruments. And they are attributed to workings of a mindful, active, creative, and restless will, which some of us call witchcraft or miracle. The inventive mind discovers a lack. Professor Lupano referred to that earlier in his opening remarks. The inventive mind recovers a lack or a need and puts itself to work to elevate it. I had it told when I was an undergraduate decades back at the university in Ife there. A professor of engineering at that university, that was before I got there, designed and fabricated a yam pounding machine. I don't know if I know my older colleagues there will remember that. I do not recollect the name of that professor. I do not recollect if that individual is of Ekiti Providence or yam eating, someone who comes from pounded yam eating regions of southwestern Nigeria. Well, I would not be surprised if he was. Even if he's not, you're all familiar with the saying about inventions and necessities. That is the larger illustration I'm making. That professor identified some need for a yam pounding machine that will reduce work, that will make things more efficient, perhaps better, and he put his creative will. He invented it. He made a yam pounding machine. The inventor makes something new. Discoveries derive largely from how an existing object, thought, thing, or idea discloses itself, many times accidentally or incidentally, to the observer. As my generation learned decades ago in elementary school social studies classes, something called the River Niger, revealed its Futajalon mountain sources to some person named Mango Park. Generations were taught in the same manner that Christopher Columbus, that Italian sailor, did not create Hispaniola. He only discovered it. In conventional language, Madame Curie did not invent polonium or radium. Isaac Newton did not create gravity. I use these as examples of discovery that's different from invention. I often asked whether one can be said to have invented or discovered what one has not created. How could one have invented or discovered what one has not created? I brought up this question in light of recent criticisms of the historical claims about Columbus and Mr. Park, because the central issues raised in those questions relate to fundamental processes of invention, discovery, and interdisciplinary collaboration. Neither Park nor Columbus, critical history writing now insists, could have done what each is said to have accomplished. However, the same question is not asked about Isaac Newton and his discoveries, and I'm not referring to West or non-West here. Mango Park is from the West. Christopher Columbus is a man of the West. Let us postpone that discussion, maybe to Q&A, and just note for now, at least, that both discovery and invention result from practices, usually normative, that practices that confound institutional expectations. Both invention and discovery result from practices, usually normative, that confound institutional expectations. The paradox of confounding and also normative is resolved only when discoveries and inventions are demonstrably shown to be repeatable long enough for necessary adjustments to governing prescriptive statements and practices. To continue, the scope of invention is limitless. Anything and everything could be invented or reinvented. Discoveries are tied to what is known or reasonably expected to exist. In practice, however, the division is just a knowledge production management device. We use, we call some things discoveries and others inventions to manage knowledge production processes, because both ends are outcomes of creative will. I repeat that. Both discoveries and inventions are results of creative will and the ability to conjure things into being, to conjure things, which includes ideas, thought, and objects in excess of what exists. Whether you discover or you invent, your goal is to conjure into existence in things, objects, and ideas in excess of what exists. At Ife, Nairobi, Legon, Khartoum, Lusaka, Cape Town, or Timbuktu. Discovery and invention involve coaxing, teasing out, or massaging newness, either in the form of an alloy or in the form of an exposition into existence. Let me say as an aside here that I followed some of the presentations earlier today. And everything I'm saying, everything I heard, confirmed what I'm just repeating now. I listened to some of those presentations, the effort to change, the effort to amend, the effort to know. What I will encourage those people, the younger scholars who spoke this morning, to add to what they are doing is to be self-conscious, to know, to be self-critical of what they are doing. Am I inventing? Am I discovering? And what instruments am I using? And to what ends? Let me continue back to my prepared notes. Exercising the will to know, to discover, or to invent involves the precipitation of things and occurrences. The academic who is involved in interdisciplinary work precipitate things. You make things happen. You exercise will or occurrences. Again, refer back to the papers, to the presentation they had this morning. We are trying to make things happen, either by description or by prescription. We want to clean the environment. We want to have to be sure that health insurance access is available to many. Just to mention two things that I recall quickly immediately from what I heard this morning. Inventions expose inventions. Let me add this because I'll be coming back to it repeatedly. Inventions expose the limits of what is. What is. We know what is, what exists. We want to extend the limit. That's what inventions do. And all the papers I had this morning, that's what I want them to be able to think that that's what they're doing, regardless of their methodology, regardless of the surveys, regardless of their findings. They are trying to expose the limits of what is. And what's the point of exposing the limits of what is? The exposure, incidental or intentional, should cause a rethinking of what ought to. I took those two terms from ethics, what is and what ought to. And I want to encourage us to always have that at the back of our mind. We are trying to extend the limits of what is, expose the limits so that we can rethink what ought to. And if we are so blessed to bring about an idea of what ought to be and not what is. And heaven knows, we all of us as Africans, we know a lot that should not be on our continent. What we are not doing, what we need to do more is find out, create, how to bring about, invent, or discover what ought to as academics. And we cannot do this within our silos, within our disciplinary silos. If you want to invent, if you want to create what is, or what ought to, your approach to what is, your approach to understanding what is must be complex and multidisciplinary. This is my way of saying that the ethical imperative is never too far away from considerations of discovery and invention, especially in relation to two fundamental processes of description and prescription that make intellectual work, whether inventive or discovering, comprehensible. It was in the classrooms of the University at Ife, under whose auspices we are gathered, that I first learned, in the context of language studies, decades back, about the functions, about the distinctions between prescription and description. Prescription and description. If you remember my title, my presentation is thick prescriptions and thin descriptions. About distinction between prescription and description. Descriptive studies establish two parameters of languages, I learned. Two parameters, subject, verb, object. The subject must come first, the verb follows, then the object ends it. Then even within the subject, there are ways to collocate. There are things that come together. There are things, if they don't come together, they are not well done. Those are prescriptions, grammar or syntax, as it were, of how things should be. So as I said, two parameters of language, spoken or written, and descriptive studies, descriptive linguistics, under the disguise, they take on the disguise of, under the disguise of what is, under the disguise of promoting what is in reality. That's what descriptive work does. We reveal what is there. We explain what is there. We reveal what occurs. Descriptive endeavors focus on incidents, units, the discrete parts, the sequence they follow, how they combine, along time and place, considerations, and other attributes of being that we believe render as accurately, which is to say truthfully, many will say, as the reporting equipment permits, the character of what is observed. Descriptive endeavors focus on incidents, parts, units, sequence, combination, timing, location, and other attributes of being that render as accurately as the reporting equipment permits the character of what is observed. Again, let me refer back to some of the presentations made this morning. Fantastic descriptions. Fantastic descriptions. What I wanted to add, what I want to urge you to add as disciplinary, interdisciplinary scholars is self-consciousness. Be aware, always question, if you are not self-conscious, you will not know what you are doing. You may not know where you are wrong. You may not know what you need to do next. Inventors record the fabrication processes that lead to the emergence of their newly created object. They keep logs. Logs kept by discoverers disclose the emergence of the object, thought, idea, thing, or place encountered. Description guarantees for both invention and discovery. Description guarantees, as it were, intellectual honesty. Accurate description guarantees intellectual honesty. Because prescriptions proceed from the sensibility of what is, descriptions proceed from the sensibility of what is, nothing is ruled out in advance as not belonging or worthy of coming into being, or worthy of coming into being analyzed. Please note that. Descriptions, in other words, I'm reiterating the virtue of description in interdisciplinary work. Description proceed from the sensibility of what is, what exists. You don't rule out in advance as not belonging what you need to discover first. Someone was speaking earlier about health insurance and gender and sex in southwestern Nigeria. There's a lot of ruling out going on there in the practices that person was observing. Why are women ruled out? Why do men rule themselves in? Those are the critical questions we should be asking our people when we study the situations we study. In the sciences, proof or evidence is to theory or hypothesis as description is to prescription. The syntax of prescription goes something like, if this, then that. That's the syntax, the grammar of prescription. If this, then that. If you have this, you must have that. If you don't have that, then something is wrong with thisness or thatness. But let me add, between this and that, there is a lot of positing, a lot of description, many times implied and never stated explicitly. You see what I'm trying to do here? I'm trying to, yes, I speak of invention and discovery, prescription and description, and at the same time, in an interdisciplinary forum, I'm urging us to always think them together, to think discreteness together. So that's why I said that between this and that, a lot of positing or description is at play. Look at, you've ever heard of the statement, the Enlightenment statement in philosophy, that I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. I call it a proverb. A lot of people call it other things. But from the perspective of studies, I call it a proverb of enlightenment, a proverb of philosophy. Philosophers don't think they use proverbs. I think they use a lot. They depend a lot on proverbs. I think, therefore I am, prescribes. It's a prescription. But at the same time, it describes. I think, therefore I am. One could say safely that in the humanities, logic is the operator of description. In the hard sciences, theory or hypothesis is the instrument of prescription. In the humanities, logic is the operator of description. Then you might ask me, doesn't description, given the way I've been speaking about it, sound highly colonialist? Isn't prescription essentially colonialist? Well, it could be. If you come to Chui language from the perspective of Latin, and you think that if it doesn't conform, if the observations, your discoveries, what you're observing, what you're describing in Chui or Zulu does not match Latin, the prescriptions of Latin, therefore Chui or Zulu is not a language, then it's colonialist. So that's what I mean by that. Again, you can only engage in that kind of critique if you are self-aware, if you know, and you can question the processes and the goals, the ends being served. But no community of academic practice can do without some coherent ground, some coherent statement about their ground of existence, even if they are contested and unstable. In other words, you cannot do without prescription. You cannot do interdisciplinary work without some sense of prescription. Prescriptive studies tend to be predictive, starting and ending with expectations and foreclosures. Let me make two proverbial remarks, if you could call them that. One, description is short and prescription is long. I'm sorry. Prescription is short and description is long. You know what I'm playing with the art and life. Two, the path to prescription goes through description. The path to description, the path to prescription, the short prescription, the hypothesis, the theory, the coherent ground of existence goes through large-scale, wide, we could even say prolix description. It is clear, I hope, in all that I've been saying, that collaboration is at the heart of intellectual work. Collaboration is at the heart of intellectual work. As a recently deceased friend, professional interlocutor, and fellow alum of IFE used to tell me and remind me always, wherever there is no discipline, that is not interdisciplinary. There is no discipline that is not interdisciplinary. That's what that friend used to remind me of every time we talk and speak. Let me put that observation in the other way. The most significant, and you should be able to relate this quickly, the most significant or high impact, as they say in quantifications of academic work, the most significant publications, research publications, are those that are referenced across disciplines. And why is that the case? Think about this. It's probably because they influence inventions and discoveries in relation to prescription and description. High impact publications, high impact research output are often those that are quoted across disciplines, in many disciplines. And they work so well, that's the situation because they influence inventions and discoveries. Those interdisciplinary work, those high impact work influence discoveries and inventions. Africa and its institutions, perhaps more than any other occupied continent, has been subjected to shiploads, armadas of prescriptions, and tons of descriptions repeatedly. I am not advocating a moratorium on prescriptions and descriptions, please. The problem I'm highlighting is that the flotilla of prescriptions and descriptions that define Africa are not driven by the ethical impulse to know the nature of what is on the ground. Most of the prescription, that's why we have African institutes. That's why I'm sure one of the things that motivated Professor Lukman and others to start this project. You could invite all of you to come to Princeton. Princeton could come to IFE. Harvard could come to IFE. But that's not what we intend to produce. Not because descriptions and prescriptions are bad in themselves, but because we need to pay attention to what is. Give critical attention to what is before we can begin to formulate what ought to. The problem I'm highlighting is that the flotilla of prescriptions and descriptions that define Africa are not driven by the ethical impulse to know the nature, the true nature of what is on the continent, but dominated by the shortcuts of what ought to. We keep importing what ought to without aligning them, without joining them to what is. As scholars, I want to plead with you, I want to urge you, when you write, when you work, when you research, when you teach, when you apply for grants, when you become administrators, when you become leaders, try as much as you can to question your ought to. Question your ought to project. And ask yourself, how will this match what is? How is this connected, derived from what is? And how do I know if the ought to that I'm importing, that I'm using, applies to my what is? The what is of the immediate environment that I'm trying to address. Let me give you a few examples. One is from me. Actually, both are from my own work. Many years ago, these are about MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, you know, those brain things. I don't know if you've been in one. It's a giant machine. They make you lie as if in a casket. And the machines, it goes for about 1 hour trying to produce a clear image of internal body parts, things that you cannot see physically. Many years ago, when I started to study performance-based poems addressed to individuals, or oriki, praise poetry, as we call it in critical studies, when I began to study those poems as a major form within the dominant arts of being, arts of social being in Yoruba language, I gave a work-in-progress lecture at the campus where I was then teaching. The presentation included a review of existing work in the field. In the literature review section of the talk, my references privileged the works and words of an eminent scholar who used to teach at the University of Lagos, Professor Adeboye Babalola, on how such poems, when they are competently performed, swell the head of the addressee. That when I was quoting Professor Adeboye Babalola, that when a praise poet is well performed and fully accomplished, it swells the head of the addressee. I reported Babalola to my audience. This was western part of the United States. I reported Babalola to have said that the successful praise poem becomes, during performance, a thing, a commodity, an object, a talisman, as it were, that confers prestige, magically confers prestige, honor, and stokes pride and euphoria in the addressee. On all the what I was trying to explain for my audience that Professor Adeboye Babalola used was iwuri, literally the swelling of the head. That's what it means. That is, your head, you feel impressed, you feel honored, you feel pride, and you feel proud in what from what you have heard, what is addressed to you. You know, as they say in Nigerian evangelical circles, you claim what is said about you. Your body claims it. And one of the ways your body claims what is said about you is you paste money. You spray money. I know Professor Adogemes earlier said, don't spray money. Well, that spraying is for another day. We'll talk about that another day. But I was reporting to my audience in what Professor Adeboye Babalola said about praise poetry. And you know, praise poetry, what Adeboye Babalola was saying was not just tradition, but also what we do in academic work today, especially in West Africa. I referred to citation earlier. It's praise poetry. It's nothing else more than that. The miscarriage of my meaning of the miscarriage of meaning in my word choice, head swelling. That's the word I used. The phrase I used to translate iwuri, that is the expansion of the head, literally the swelling of the head, is that one of my the miscarriage of meaning in my word choice, head swelling, to translate iwuri, as important as that might be, is not the focus of my reference here. The relevant issue is that one of my colleagues in that university, who is not African, suggested that I should consider a brain scanning project to test Babalola's elegant theory of poetry. Well, I did not follow that suggested course. And I think I missed a great opportunity that which might have resulted in my making a groundbreaking, maybe head-breaking contribution to cognitive poetics, which is a major field in literary studies today, cognitive poetics. I missed that opportunity because I was not being interdisciplinary. I was focused on description instead of prescription. That fellow was a scientist. He was from psychology, and his psychology is based on experiments and testing things. And he asked, why don't you do any MRI imagings of the brain of those who enjoyed praise poetry? I asked myself, as my colleague spoke in that presentation, what has MRI imaging, what has magnetic resonance imaging technology got to do with praise singing? Does the machine understand Yoruba poetry? In retrospect, the reason that was the question that came to my mind was that my main research interest was descriptive. We may even say thick descriptive. I believed then that setting out and calibrating accurately all the dimensions and aspects, pre and post textuation of specific instances of performed praise poetry was all that a conscientious literary scholar could do. My approach neglected the opportunity to sort out in a radically different way, perhaps, the elegant, thin description embedded in Professor Babalola's words. How else, I now realize, could one prove that the fully accomplished performance of a praise text realized in the patron's expressed pleasant consumption is a commodity, a thing? That's what Professor Abimbola called it. Although it is insubstantial, not substantial in itself. Although it stokes self-satisfaction, the term I will use today instead of head swelling, that created a path for me, a path that I did not take. Why did I miss my opportunity? The level of the necessarily interdisciplinary collaboration would have required my having to secure, either by learning or by convincing those who have the knowledge to join me in a research consortium, the technical know-how for operating brain scanning machines, and also for interpreting the results needed for such a project. That project looked daunting for the literary critic that I was and that I still am. I might return to MRI at the end of this talk. But I want to give a happier instance, a happier related case that ended happily. I was privileged to peer review and recommend a paper and comment on a journal article on the electronics of the tuning of the talking drum, the Yoruba talking drum, dundun. You know, and I understand they have it all over West Africa. To review and comment on, or peer review and comment on the electronics of the tuning of the Yoruba talking drum, arguing that there are deep implications for how those sounds could be synthesized and then programmed electronically, such that it could become, you could key it instead of beating the drum. Fascinating analysis, but it was deeply interdisciplinary. That person understood the language of drums. That person demonstrated the value of talking drums in the Yoruba society that he based from which he drew his data, his research, his survey. But he subjected those surveys, he subjected what he saw, he subjected what is recorded to the interest of another discipline, electronics, particularly the electronics of sound and differences in between sounds. Well, maybe one day your keyboard will be doing the talking drum. Who knows? I also happen to have been asked to comment on a project meant for devising an algorithm, yes, an algorithm for automatic tone recognition in Yoruba language. So that when you speak, the intention is that ultimately this initial research will catalyze the emergence of automatic voice transcription in Yoruba language, such that when you speak and your phone transcribes, it will actually put the tone marks as we do in writing. Again, that you cannot do that. You cannot do that just as a linguist. You need some knowledge of how algorithms work. You need some knowledge of how apps are constructed. You need some very, very fine knowledge of how to survey. And you need very deep knowledge of how to analyze sounds electronically and attach them to certain values, such that when you hear these, even within such a wide range over many voices, many pitches, your phone or the device you are using will still be able to pinpoint rather accurately, even better than humans, what tone, whether it's a low tone on the viol, whether it's a mid-tone, and whether it's a high tone. In tonal languages, which many of us speak in West Africa, that is basic to how we carry on our lives. If you are going to carry on our lives as we should be, we have to go beyond what is, to connect back to what I've been saying earlier. We have to go beyond what is, discover or invent, so that we can create what ought to, so that things will be easier for us. What is the lesson here that I'm pursuing? Interdisciplinary scholarship must not be merely descriptive or simply prescriptive. The spirit that moves interdisciplinary work must welcome thin description as well as expository or revelatory thick description. The genuinely interdisciplinary work will be motivated by the inventive spirit. We want to invent and not just discover. Thin descriptions do not disclose, but create and speculate. Iwuri head swelling that I was struggling with in my that I told you I was struggling with never shows itself as such. It never shows itself. Your swelling, your head swelling will never show itself as such. It shows in the way in your response to the commodity that the performer presented to you. But head swelling, what I used to call head swelling, what I'm now calling self-satisfaction, the character of self-satisfaction after enjoying or experiencing praise poetry cannot be recovered in itself. The concept has to be invented. It has to be distilled. It has to be fabricated out of many elements and many equipments. Even if I followed my colleague's advice, the results of our research could only have yielded more descriptions of brain activities in the heads of poetry connoisseurs or poetry consumers. The enlarged descriptions will have resulted, if you are to do more, to really do genuinely interdisciplinary work, it will have the only result you could have gained from our rich collaboration, if it will amount to anything, will have combined insights from literary and cultural criticism and neurology. If our results do not combine insights from both disciplines, you will just be describing. I'll be describing poetry. I'll be when you hear this word, these neuron flashes lights up in your brain. When you say this kind of words, this kind of neuron does not light up in your brain. Who wants that? Who needs that? How does that tell us what ought to? All we'll be describing is what is. Although we'll say we'll be doing interdisciplinary work. Interdisciplinary work must not be timid, and I'm moving towards the end now. Interdisciplinary work must not be timid. It must be adventurous. It must be convivial and open-bordered. When I say convivial, I don't mean parties. I mean in a convivial environments, you give and you take. You surrender. You lower your guards. The guards that you have been trained for so long to always keep up when you are doing literary criticism, when you are doing sociology, when you are doing physics, when you are doing electronics. You have to lower those guards so that you can allow others. You can interact with others. You can embrace others. That project, the well-done interdisciplinary project, could only be well managed, and I'm referring to leaderships and institutions here, could only be well managed within a curatorial sensibility of the museum, of the Arts Gallery. The well-done interdisciplinary project, the successful interdisciplinary project, could only be well managed within a curatorial sensibility of the Museum of High Arts Gallery. Why do I say that? The Museum of High Arts Gallery is translocal. It's interdisciplinary. It's curation. It brings in many parts. It cuts off from original locations, cuts things up from original locations and put them and creates a new location, a new environment. You invent, the curator invents and describes. By the way, what I just summarized there on the proper way of creating interdisciplinary institutions, the inspiration for that statement came from a book that came out late last year by a good friend and colleague, Professor Akin Adeshokon. The book is titled Everything is Sampled. Everything is sampled. Go look for it. You will like it, especially the approach to interdisciplinary thinking and work. The book is titled Everything is Sampled. It's from that book that I took the idea of curatorial sensibility. If you want to do genuine interdisciplinary work and manage genuine interdisciplinary project. And when I say manage, I don't just mean you becoming the leader of a center, but also how you manage your own local project that you are doing. You must work with the sensibility of a curator in the way you talk to people, in the way you organize your work, in the way you carry out your survey. Always think translocally, even if you are from the locality. Once you talk to them, you are translocalizing, you are translocating. Once you survey, you are translocating yourself, you're also translocating your subject of study. Well, let me conclude. And the best way to conclude is, as they say in Nigeria, plenty words do not fill up a basket. Ordinary winds blow them away. I want to close with this example from an 18th century text, a letter written by Reverend Philip Kweku. Our colleagues from Ghana will probably know the story of Reverend Kweku. I don't know why Ghanaians don't like that guy. I love him a lot, but my Ghanaian colleagues don't like liking him. But I still like Reverend Kweku, the first non-European to be ordained a priest in the Anglican Church, in the Church of England, in 1765, in England. Reverend Kweku was an experiment by the United Society for the propagation of the gospel in other lands. They took Reverend Kweku and two other young, you call them boys, I think they're young men, to England to train them as priests so that they can come back and preach and convert in Fanti language, in Fanti discourse in Cape Coast. Two of them died. They did not even finish. One of them went crazy completely and died in an asylum. Only Reverend Kweku survived. He was trained, returned to Ghana, to Cape Coast. And his apartment, the missionary was paying half of his salary. And the slave traders, the Cape Coast, those who owned the Cape Coast slave trading depot were paying half of his salary. And was living right on top of the slaves, of the recently enslaved, before they were exported. Again, try to picture Reverend Kweku. How will he not go mad? He never did. This is a person charged to preach the gospel of freedom in the house of unfreedom, right? In the location of unfreedom there. He observed many things. I called him as leader of a revolution that had no model to follow. That's what Reverend Kweku's fate. In October 1777, his uncle, one of his uncles, maternal uncles, the leader of his Abusua, that's the matrilineal family in Ghana, Kojo Kabusie, died. There was a grand funeral. He actually used the word befitting burial. That's the first place in English language I found the phrase befitting burial, which is now a common word, common term used in Nigerian, I think even Ghanaian too, and other Anglophone, English-speaking African countries when referred to a grand lavish funeral. So he actually called his uncle's interment a befitting burial. He described what happened. It was a pageant, shooting into the air, dancing, colorful people. And at the end, it was actually the longest letter that Reverend Kweku ever sent back to his sponsors in London, in England. But towards the end of the letter, he wondered, and I think he did a lot of description. But what he discovered was in his prescriptive statement, where it said, I wondered how my people are celebrating a funeral as if they were celebrating a harvest. Reverend Kweku wondered why a grand funeral is celebrated by his Fanti people, Fanti relatives, as if they were celebrating a harvest. Well, scholars have taken him up on that. There are many ways to read him. His prescription. One way to read Kweku's prescriptive statement, is that he came, like many others have done, and they still do, or many of us still do, with prescriptions that are not derived from what is. Reverend Kweku's moral critique of his people jumped straight ahead to what ought to, abandoning completely the meaning of what is in front of him. My challenge to you, to this cohort of the Institute, is to think about how do we rescue Kweku, how do we reinsert Reverend Kweku into our work? How do we make it relevant to what we do? One thing I would suggest is not to throw him away and say, oh, he's a colonialist. Oh, his head has been captured by those who trained him to be a missionary, to be a clergyman in Cape Coast in late 18th century. What we need to do to criticize him, the kind of criticism I will recommend, is that we go beyond the records of Reverend Kweku, the plain letters of Reverend Kweku, and tease out what could be said. What statement can we make about those practices in Cape Coast in the 18th century? And I'm getting close to the end here, so please bear with me in the next few minutes. The question to ask is why the scholar, and I'm calling Reverend Kweku a scholar here, presents his overview of the thickness he witnessed and reported as something spectacular, singular, and peculiar to a people who commemorate the passing of a great leader as if they were celebrating a bountiful harvest. One answer is to admonish the scholar for not collaborating with the Abusua, the people he was studying, and contributing, although he contributed more than half of his annual salary. I know many of you do that. Not half of my salary. I contributed a lot to funeral expenses. I don't know if you do. I do. More than half of his annual salary in 1777 to the funeral of his uncle. And in the end, it was a colorful passion. But at the same time, he said, oh my God, my people are so backward. They celebrate a funeral as if they mourn as if they were not mourning, as if they suffered no loss. The far more significant question I want to suggest is, when does thin circumstance disengagement? I want us to recuperate Kweku's words, Kweku's descriptions for circumstance disengagement statements. In other words, thin statements. Let us devise thin descriptions, thin statements from Reverend Kweku's large descriptions about the grand funeral in Cape Coast in 1767. And this is what I mean. And Reverend Kweku is not alone. I've read many, many accounts of grand funerals. That's one of the projects I'm working on now, accounts of grand funerals in Africa. There are so many condescending statements that scholars make, native and non-native, like exactly the same way that Reverend Kweku spoke. And many of them are interdisciplinary. They speak about, they know videography, they study videography, they study communications. They've approached the study of grand funerals from many, many perspectives. Many of them bringing all these perspectives together as a way to describe, to understand what's going on. But in the end, they still end up like Reverend Kweku. We may record events with the most sophisticated equipment and assemble a large retinue of professionals, sound, video, ethnography, microeconomics, fashion analysis, musicology, and ethics in the study of West African grand funeral, so that we can help capture in the most accurate proportions the minutest details and processes of grand funerals. If in the end, the curator of such a project, well endowed, well funded, fails to convince, fails to create, fails to work out, if only in outline, circumstance detached, and apparatus-free motivations, apparatus-free motivations of the motions, of the gestures, so well captured, neither discovery nor consequential invention will have been served. Metapsychology, just to give an example, metapsychology of mourning rarely appears in studies of grand funerals in Africa. You rarely see statement about mourning in even interdisciplinary projects. To begin to address that lack in the scholarship of celebratory funerals in Africa, is the ostentatious attention devoted to the well-being, and this is the question I want to ask. We may work on it in the Q&A. Is the ostentatious attention that West Africans in particular devote to the well-being of the deceased, during the curation, their curation, not your scholarly curation, their own curation of a befitting burial produces the right feelings that allow relatives of those who die a proper death to conclude the work of mourning? Let me repeat that. Is the ostentatious attention devoted to the well-being of the deceased during the curation of a befitting burial produce the right feelings that allow relatives of those who die a proper death to further the work of mourning? In other words, what motivates faith when we look at West African funerals, or African funerals in general? The welfare of the deceased or the welfare of the bereaved? What was Reverend Kweku witnessing and describing? What happens if Kweku and people like us, people like you and me, were to view the multimodal activities, the multimodal activity that Kweku reports differently, and think of death as his relatives appear to be doing, as an achievement that must be celebrated? Not only that, but move on and construe the dead as agents capable of will and desire. As agents, the dead as people, individuals or things or objects capable of will and desire. Perhaps Kweku and you and me will discover that the conviviality, that while conviviality is taxing and expensive and exacting, you cannot produce a grand funeral without spending a lot of money. The accompanying pleasure, even fleeting, displaces the disappointment of loss. Who knows? Without asking them. The goodness that comes with not being alone after witnessing a relative complete the task of living could be a stabilizing counterweight to the agitation and anxiety that ordinarily attaches to accomplished ends. If I can venture a final statement this afternoon, it's mid-morning here where I am, the truly inventive interdisciplinary academic institution in the African context must be committed to more, quote, circumstance detached and apparatus-free inventions and discoveries. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Professor Kadibiki, for that very stimulating, rewarding, and refreshing presentation. A round of applause for him. Thank you very much. I know that we are getting our questions ready, and that we have so many questions here and some online. Before we take questions, I'd like to recognize the presence of the Vice Chancellor, Professor Simeon Bamida, ably represented by the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, Innovation, and Development, Professor Anthony Adeyemi. Welcome, please, let's have him. Thank you very much.
Let me say good afternoon first, and the different listeners, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you know. First, I think apologies for the management, the also important. We have the first person to take topic, and we all have to prepare. We will go to the research, and I will just, we also come around, so let me just be able to mention some protocols, and you have to connect with my approach. You guys been protocol, and it's not property to be, and because of but first to bring the things from the right chancellor of the money. First, we have next, I am a leader of the vice chancellor, and a professor of the and I'm able. If I need me without any saying academics, there's something like academic Dutch. The lady is one of the concerning things. And academic study, and our professor on the bottom. And if I have the permission of the house also to join the academic study as part of culture, our money, if that is permitted, when we look at it. So I've been getting from the vice chancellor. And my editors, mentors, and teachers, and teaching one, I don't know if I've seen money on my grandmother. Emeritus Professor, it's always nice, anyone. And I can say all of my wonderful teachers, if I start to mention names, like I do not address people. So I want to greet all my teachers from left to the right, and from the front row, they'll be part. So please, let me clap for all of my teachers and all of my advisors. And that includes my teachers from within OAU. I don't want to mention in particular that I can say if you don't mention his name, it's going to give you a knock. And all of my brothers and those who are playing from different places from the US, sincerely I've been getting from the Vice Chancellor. We still likely to be here. We just follow the council, we need to drop them, we just say, please, you just run. You go and do whatever I need to do. So I've not seen the program that I mean, you should declare the program, definitely, because it's very useful. So I want, in the name of the Vice Chancellor, Professor Adebaro Senior Daniel, declare the 2024 if Institute of Advanced Studies program open. Thank you.
very much, sir. Back to the keynote speech by Professor Adeleke. It's important for us to have an interactive session in the form of questions and answers. That's important. Professor Adeleke mentioned something. Who are those that benefit from defeating the illness? The diseased or the bereaved? So many, but I've found that presentation quite stimulating. He says we must pay attention to what is before we can talk about what ought to. He said something that caught my attention. There is no discipline that is not interdisciplinary. And oh, no wonder. You hear geophysics, biochemistry, social linguistics. So there is that, it means that interdisciplinarity is inevitable.
Yep.
And that's where we are. And this is why building communities of practice, interdisciplinary collaboration with academic leadership in Africa is this. It's very new. That's the very need of the hour. And we know that we're still going to be having very many stimulating presentations within around this theme. If we have questions for Professor Adeleke from that presentation, and you're here in the hall physically, would you raise your hands and see how many questions you have in the house? If you have questions. If you're shy, I'm sure that especially our fellows, I'm sure that by the time we will be closing in the next 2 weeks, you will no longer be shy. So air your views to create your knowledge or recreate what you have known. So if you are shy, you can just write your question, or you just do not want to be known for you. You can write your question very quickly, but if you want to ask your questions directly, you can indicate by raising your hand. Okay, so we have Prof, then we have Professor David. Yes, sir. Professor David, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Prof. My main desire is to stand up to thank you most sincerely for agreeing to give this keynote address. I know that it's very difficult to say no to us. And I want to express a deep appreciation. I know Professor is still going to but it's very important for me to get up and express deep appreciation to you. You're quite right in the observation of how we managed the whole thing. You happen to be one of the few scholars in the field, particularly in African studies, in the United States and in the world, I would say, who through lectures and speeches like this allow us to know that irrespective of what the tradition you are studying, in your case, African literature, that you can get into a scientific discourse that is so sophisticated, and yet we find a way of coming to our level and the level of young scholars that have been listening to you to show the relevance of that. Unknown to you, you have carefully combined ethnographic narratives that, irrespective of the discipline here, whether they're in religion or in literature or in philosophy, you touched on everything. And indeed, before the presentation, you also listened to the speeches given and the report given by the younger scholar. And you wrote commentary on what you have said. It is very rare. And when you refer to your colleague, as I wrote, and you didn't mention the name, I was every time because I realized how close you were to him. In literature, we regarded both of you as the shining stars in African literature. And may God continue to rest in peace and take care of his family. So I just want to thank you. I thought you were just going to say no after the whole incident, but you said no. You're coming. I asked Dr. Where I said, I see you're going to tell you I'm going to come. Then I called you and I had a conversation with you, then I knew what had happened. So I think you move sincerely and may God continue to do.
Yes, sir.
Huge sacrifice there. Sometimes you don't want to see people. People like Professor Beleke. I feel that expression is too little. It doesn't carry the weight of that gratitude. Professor Beleke, thank you so much. Thank you.
There is
We will continue to thank you because what you have created in us this afternoon will endure for a very long time to come. We thank you, sir. We take our questions.
I think there's one online. There's one
Yes.
question.
You want to respond to that first?
Yeah,
Before we take
I can.
this?
Yeah,
Please
yeah.
do. Please do.
Palumi Folajimi, I think he's in the US. I believe I know him.
Yes.
Ask, what do I have to say about contemporary Nigerian politicization and transaction of burial ceremonies? For example, Charlie Boy sent politicians away from the burial ceremony of his father. He said his father's burial should not be hijacked by politicians. Obi Kubana and his mother used his mother's burial ceremony as an opportunity to display his wealth and his influence. Well, I hope Palumi Folajimi was able to, follow the whole talk. I just used the example of grand funeral, which happens to be something I'm working on now as a way of working out my intention. My plan is not just to describe, as I said, not just to prescribe, as many of the things I've read do. They prescribe, it's immoral. Why do you have to spend so much money? They forget that in the United States, caskets for ordinary people, regular Joe, as they see here, caskets could cost as much as $10,000 in the United States. That's a lot of money. So funerals are big deals everywhere. What really get me annoyed, get me going, is when I hear about the pathologizing of the African what is, and then project an ought to that does not recognize what is. And what is some, look, as they say again, I study Proverbs, dinner is served everywhere, in all lands. Dinner is served in all lands. The difference is in the taste of the dish. That's what they say in Yoruba. So grand funerals are everywhere. It's not particularly African. Don't let us pathologize. It's not a disease that Africans suffer from. But there are ways. What we do, what do we talk to them? As I said, Kweku contributed half of his annual salary, Reverend Kweku, to that grand funeral he witnessed. And it was a big occasion. But in the end, he condemned it by not asking them. And when I asked earlier, one of the questions I asked, so he said, what do I think about grand funerals? I think grand funerals, for those who can afford it, let them go ahead. Those who want to do grand funerals, let them go ahead. They are mourning. The grand funerals are acts of mourning. They are walking out mourning. Think about it. Think about it. Think about. Again, I'm not rationalizing African ways in quote, but I'm trying to understand, to tease out, as Professor Lupono caught me saying in his remarks, trying to quote anthropology and ethnography, that it is not enough to just describe thickly. Kubana did this, Charlie Boy did that, Chukwuemeka did this, Adeleke Adieko did that in his mother's funeral. That's not, we need to go more than that. What binds them? What binds them? What binds those? That will not appear to us directly from the descriptions. We have to distill it. We have to synthesize it. We have to synthesize it, applying what we know and bringing them to join with what they tell us, and then come out. I mean, what those we observe tell us, and then try to come out with a rationale that does not pathologize what is in the name of what ought to. What's the alternative to funeral? What's the alternative? Okay, so that's what yes, Mr. Folajimi, I follow funerals. I follow funerals a lot. I know, and I'm working on it. But I think we need to work out a theory of mourning based on those observations. When I asked the question, is it like it was noted earlier, is the grand funeral in honor of the dead or for the benefit of the bereaved? Look, I think that's a wrong question. The question we should be asking is, what is it about mourning, about existence, about dying, that is being displayed, that is being, look, in many societies, at least in standard theories of mourning, in major accounts of mourning, a death is a loss. You walk through it so that you could move on. As they say in Igbo land, I'm told in a proverb, only the fly that has no one to advise it follows the corpse into the grave. You look, I've read theories of mourning all over. They repeat that in different ways. They repeat that phrase, that sentiment in many ways in many other societies. So when you dress, when you pray, when you tell the dead, don't close your eyes. There's a concept of existence in that statement that we need to tease out further. Can the dead will? Can the dead exercise will? Can the dead have a desire? That's what our people are saying. And I do not want to discount them, because these are accumulated practices. They didn't just wake up. It's an accumulated, it keeps changing. The patterns keep changing, but it's an accumulation of thought, accumulation of motions that we have to unpack layer by layer until we're able to come up with a thin description, thin characterization, which I think travels more, far longer than just hefty descriptions.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for nothing we're doing. That's very useful answer. I know that we have 2 more questions here, and then we take more.
Right.
And this time we still have only 2. Just a minute. Let's read this to his hearing. I'm writing on burial process in Africa, the rise of mental health. Someone is doing research on burial process in Africa, the rise of mental health. And that person is asking, how can I make it an interdisciplinary research from what it is to what it ought to be? That's the question. Would you like me to read the second one so you take the 2 together?
Oh, let me
take this.
Let me take it quickly. Let me please repeat the last part, the question part.
Okay. How can I make it an interdisciplinary research from what it is right now to what it ought to be? Okay. That's a very good question. That person was listening, I believe, attentively to what I was saying about what is and what ought to. Yes, look, like the reference I was making to Kweku earlier. Kweku saw an intermodal, multimodal, MODAL, multimodal passion in front of him. But what did he bring to it? The morality of the Christian morality. That's what it brought to describe it. To make your work different, to make your work interdisciplinary, I want to suggest that you reflect the multimodality of what you see in front of you, that your report, your description is pays some attention, gives some careful attention to the multimodality that you're observing. Then to go beyond that and then report, describe, and write about what you saw, not just on the basis of what your discipline has told you to find. Oh, I'm a psychologist, I'm looking for just money. Yeah, this is the right way to mourn. Oh, I'm a historian. This is the way, this is just, it's the circumstances of the late 20th, of early 21st century that created these practices. Yes, yeah, it is. It couldn't be 19th century. That's right. But you need to go beyond that if you really want to be multidisciplinary in your report. You shouldn't just say, oh, it's more, no, they're not mourning. So these people are wicked people. They spend so much money on the dead and not a lot on the living. I think that's not quite accurate of what you're saying. What I would suggest that you question yourself, that do not just come from the side of morality, come from the side of sociology too. And if you're coming from sociological point of view, don't just approach what you are seeing from the creation of a society, from the management of a society, but also bring morality, bring psychology, bring meta-psychology to it. The explanation of what's going on. Listen to them, listen to those you are studying, and then go beyond them. Ask them further questions about what they are thinking about. Not just what they thought, but ask them how they think it, or the thinking about their thinking. So I think, therefore I am. I gave that example deliberately. It's a common phrase, but it's actually a whole sentence. And it's a narrative, it's a story. There's a subject, there's an object, there is a verb in that sentence, which is that there's a story in between the beginning and the end. That's what we should find out as scholars. I'm speaking in broad terms because that's the only way I could speak in this kind of situation. If I were to have your paper in front of me or a project in front of me, I'll probably have more precise remarks
on how to make your work more interdisciplinary. But you could ask Dr. Weye, he has my email. He will, the organizer, the secretariat can send you my email.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that gesture. So you can have his email and then continue with the conversation from there. I'll have another one here. In the quest to decolonize practices that have become steamed towards Western ideologies. There is also a problem of Africans shying away from the reality of merging the two. How can a scholar in contemporary times arrive at a balance? Would you like me to take that again, sir? Prof, did you get that?
Yes, I think I can. Yeah. Okay. I think I can respond to that again if you still have time.
No, we do have to.
We still have time.
Yes.
Yeah. Again, in my own work, as Professor Lupano mentioned, that has been the cardinal view for me. Is not to oppose the West to Africa or to oppose Africa to the West. And when I say that, I'm not denying that Africa was colonized or enslaved. I'm not saying that. I do not want to deny. It's senseless. It should be dishonest to say, oh, slavery just happened, forget it. Who does that in this world? Oh, colonization, oh, the Europeans left 60 years ago, forget it. What kind of society operates like that? That 60 years they forget everything? No, no society does. So it is right to always remember that. But as interdisciplinary scholars, I do not oppose the West to my location. I always remember Hubert Ogunde. Look, our artists, I always remind my colleagues, our artists, writers, singers, filmmakers, they make the profoundest statements about our society. Many times that we just dismiss it and not give it enough mind. Hubert Ogunde, that great theater director, he sang a while back, just talking about Yoruba folks. He said, everywhere, everywhere. Even the comedian, Moses Adejumo, joked about it. Everywhere is Yoruba land. Ilẹ̀ gbogbo ń t'òrìṣà. That's what Ogunde sang. All lands are Orisha lands. So for anyone to tell me that, oh, Christianity is not Yoruba, okay. I don't continue the discussion, I just stop. Because there's no way we can reach. How can I convince them that all land is Orisha land? So it's not only Christian, it's not only European that brought Christianity to us. The assumption has been among our people in their heads that all lands belong to the Orisha. Then what are we talking about? The same other things, or any other project that you want to, that I approach, I always recommend to people I work with, especially PhD students and early career colleagues, that I take all land to be Orisha land. And I'm ready to occupy it. I occupy it the way Orisha people, the Orisha will occupy any land. Not to throw other Orishas away, but to say, oh, where one thing stands, another will stand by it. That's my approach. Thanks. So don't be anxious, don't worry, don't beat your head, just do it. Do interdisciplinary work. Do it. Do it. Look, Wole Soyinka we've been celebrating Soyinka for the past 2. Why do you think Wole Soyinka is so great? Soyinka thinks about the world. He takes look at his densest work, The Fourth Stage. Read it closely. It will take you read it over 100 times before you know what he's saying. But that's a virtue. It's not something bad. It's not a vice. It's not a weakness in Soyinka that you have to read his work 10 times to know what this man is saying in The Fourth Stage. Actually, that's a good thing. He theorizes, he thinks about the world from his Abeokuta point of view. Everywhere is Abeokuta land. Everywhere is Yoruba land. Everywhere is Africa land as far as I'm concerned. That's the approach. That's what Europeans have been doing. And that's what we need to be doing too. Look, my friend, Professor Femi Taiwo, he was one of the facilitators last year. He's written a book on truth and reconciliation in South Africa. He's a philosopher. He argues what principle of ethics, the responsibility to another, is going on, drives truth and reconciliation. That's a profound question. It's not enough to just say, oh, they need to repay us. You ask of a deep question. What principle of ethics is being applied here, is driving those actions and thoughts? The thin description, as they say in ethnography, that I'm suggesting. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yes. The next question, I don't know whether it's Dennis Ashard. Are you here? Yes. Would you like to ask your question directly, or you want me to read to it alone? You want me to read it? You see, you know what I'm asking him of? How do our institutions hinder or discourage interdisciplinary studies by the rules and regulations they formulate? I'm speaking them to it. I want to read this question because I'm passionate about it. It's real. It's real and very important. He says, that's Dennis Ashwin, I guess one of the most famous. Can I develop or grow in an environment where the majority is opposed to interdisciplinary innovations, such as methodology? How can I develop or grow in an environment where the majority is opposed to interdisciplinary innovations, such as methodology? During promotions and circuit, you'll find some people say, oh, you are not focused. You are not this. This is that. And then you're denied promotion. Promotion. It's to me, I would very much like you to address this in a very pragmatic way. Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Did you get the question?
I got the question, and
you got more. I'm sure you got more. Thank you.
That's a very, very good question. It's practical, and one of the things I remember from my studies at IFE decades back, we read about satire, about poetry of criticism. One of the statements I still remember very well, more than 50 years ago, or close to 50 years now, was in somewhere in Central Africa, one of the things a poet could do very well a good poet is believed to be able to do is behead without showing blood. To behead without spilling blood. I do not know how to do that. Again, that's a theoretical, and I really I fell in love with that statement. How do you behead without spilling blood? I think that's the question, the question you just read. I think that's what that question is asking. How do you conduct interdisciplinary research in an environment that is hostile to interdisciplinary work? Well, practically, again, pardon me for citing a proverb. You do not enter into a room and ask them, which of you killed my father, until you have the sword in your hand or the rifle. You had your finger on the rifle, ready to shoot. And how do you do that as a younger scholar? You do your interdisciplinary work interdisciplinarily. You start with that. That's how to start. If you really want to carry on, and I say that not because I'm not advising capitulation. I'm not advising lack of bravery. I'm not advising lack of boldness. You should be bold, but at the same time, you should be pragmatic, practical. Try to work the edges of the discipline. See where the limit is, the edge of the discipline is, before you enter it. I teach in an English department. That's where I'm tenured. But I also work in an interdisciplinary department, Africana Studies. I used to be in comparative literature, which by nature, comparative is dead all over now, but comparative literature is essentially a large bag. You bring in a lot of literatures. So what do you do? Let me give you an example from my own work. When I was doing the book on the slave rebellion, I know I'm in a literature department. I've been senior member of that department. But how do I get credit for this work that I'm doing, which is interdisciplinary? So I did not thumb my nose up at my discipline, because we still accept people to come and study English in that department. But when I saw poetry, when I was going to read poetry and photography together, I read photography as poetry. And I read poetry as visuality. So there is nobody in that department who could now come up and say with any authority that I do not know poetry, that what I'm doing is not English, what I'm doing is not literature. And I do literature. It requires more work, but I look at the edges, look at the limits of where you are. And I just gave you that example of photography, visuality, and poetry. I read poetry as being driven by visual images, and I read visual images as constructing theater, the theater of the person, and also as a literature of the person. So you do that. There are ways you could do it. Just think creatively. Be creative and be enterprising in your terms of description and in the kind of prescriptions you make. Be very, very creative.
Thank you. Well, because we do not have a lot of time left, but we have 3 more questions, but you will have to forgive me. You need to take down the questions, the 3 of them, so that you will take them one after the other. Otherwise, we will not be able to end. We have 2 professors in the house. I want to recognize the Dean of the Faculty of Education, Professor Bailey. Please come ask your question.
Oh.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the talk. My question is this. You talked about lowering the gap and to allow interdisciplinary approach in our research. There was a time I was in a session and we had to have a little bit of I gave a song for us to dance to. The song says, and after the song, some people came to me and said, "Prof, the song you sang, that do you know that from my own approach, the lady read really bad, she's a faculty of arts, and she began to dissect the song, telling me the implication in her own research. Another person told me from music department, the approach of his own, the approach that he will look into in analyzing the song. Now, to me, for me, I just sang the song because I was interested in it. But for my colleagues in physical and health education, recreational, they will look at the song and then the activity involved. Now, it brought me that I now began to look at the different perspective we have to research. You know, you are talking about song the other time. I'm a physics person. I will look at, okay, sign, teaching sign in your research, in your work. An artistic person who like this design now, somebody in arts will have different perspective. I'm in physics and look at the colors. Now, lowering the card, that is where I'm coming to. Do we now say that students at what level do we lower the guard? Because we have to let our students know that look, there are different interdisciplinary, different approaches to research. But in our own different faculties or departments, we are focused on our own teaching, our own curriculum. In what way do we lower the guard? Is it in curriculum innovation, bringing the curriculum together? Is it at the postgraduate level? Should it be at the research level? And to what extent do we lower the guard to be able to accommodate all of these things?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Bello. That's a very, very good. By the way, you are my dean. My degree at IFE was in education. So I did education English.
Professor Adekosa,
yeah.
please let's take all the questions that you want you respond.
All right, okay.
Please, with your indulgence.
Okay,
we
all right.
have so many questions coming out.
Oh, okay.
To Professor Muigo Fellow, yes, sir.
Let me take a comment congratulate for being able to even sustain this program. We started together last time. We still on. Coming to a program like this, enabling you to see people you have seen long time ago. And I can see Professor Ape Abedami, you are there in that year. So it's good to hear. My question, coming from Regional Studies background, we are talking of what is and what ought to be. That's very important. There are no doubt that level of stimulating. But this issue of artificial intelligence, looking at it from perspective of the video, is it really a negative or positive development? Because I have to be keeping my students trying perspective of artificial intelligence. In writing the program, I have to get for the big batch of Quran that will really bail me out. But I want to see what, because the question is what ought to be.
Thank you very much, sir. The third question is here from Professor Isoko. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Ma. I know that the time is fast spent, but this issue of interdisciplinary collaboration is really very important. And I want to thank Professor Abiyakan, for delving so much into it. But I think the starting point is what the Institute of Advanced Studies is actually doing here. Quite a number of people who are from different disciplines, the networking, is so enormous. And from that, you can always link up, and then you will know what to do after. But the question I want to pose to Prof is the issue of recognition of the discipline, the ethics of working together from different disciplines. What we tend to see in academics is that some people think that they are superior to some others. So, but that is never the case. So, we be from the discipline of dentistry, but also public health. And I know that in public health, for example, a number of people who have been able to contribute significantly. I've been from geography, from ecology, from demography, from different disciplines. But when we encourage our colleagues to go into issues of public health from this other discipline, they tell you that it is not acceptable, to them. I mean, I can't see what stops somebody from English or history or philosophy or something going into issues of malaria, of Ebola, or so many things. So, but we don't allow it. And sometimes I think it is because of that fear that if you bring in some other people into your discipline, maybe they overwhelm or something. So I want to ask Prof, what does he think should be the ethical guidelines, that can help institutions, particularly in Africa, in ensuring that when they go into interdisciplinary collaboration, that it doesn't really diminish, the outcome, that it enhances it. I also, Prof, sir, I also want to say that what we are doing here, what I can see here, is moving you this afternoon or morning or wherever we are. We have moved all the people here from what is to what it ought to be. And while you are talking, I try to look for the different ways. And I found that there are so many ways in which we have been able to move people from what is to what it ought to be. And I noted quite many, but I said, 7 is regarded as perfection. So I tried to list, so many, but 7 of those things. In the first one that I listed here is that from the enhancement of knowledge and everything, what is now is very poor salary for members of staff of Nigerian universities. But from this kind of initiative, people will be able to know that you are not limited to your territory as an academic person, and so that you can advance. And so they will move in terms of income if they keep to what the what the Institute of Advanced Studies is trying to do. The second thing, sir, is that the environment available for research has been expanded for the fellows here. So you are no longer limited to your institution. So you can always go to any of the other institutions from which we have people here. And so that's also moving from what is now to what it ought to be. The third also here that I noted here is that the rating of your university, through this link, is also going to increase. So we move from what is now to what it ought to be. And then fourthly, I'm saying that your job satisfaction as a student or as a staff, we also move from what it is now to what it ought to be. And then the fifth one that I noted here is that the completion time of any work that we are doing, particularly at the postgraduate level, is going to move faster than what it ought to have been. So you move from what it is now to what it ought to be. And then the sixth one is that your networking, your power of networking, is going to move from what it is now to what it ought to be. And then let me stop at the seventh. I see how many, but let me stop at the seventh one. So the seventh one is that your ease of publishing is going to move from what it is now to what it ought to be. So finally, I want to thank the Institute of Advanced Studies for moving each and every one of us from what it is now to what it ought to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And finally, Professor Adieko, we have one more question. That will be the last. Well, sorry, if we still have more questions, we can look to another forum through which Professor Adieko can attend to us. There is one person behind there, the one in gray. Who is that person? Yes, please. Do we have another microphone? Okay, please come. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Professor Adieko once again. The very selective talk, the keynote of it. I'm very much interested in there's a statement you made about between this and that. A lot of prostitute is deficient. I was intrigued when I heard that because recently I've been thinking a lot about maybe the or I could dig out the feeding what obvious text. And there's something that I had recently in Pastor Samuel, and he was talking about the role of the man in the water in the possibility of the water. It's like the water from John and took the water to the master master of the Savior. That what was going on in his mind? Somebody felt the water initially, and then felt the water by the direction, by the order or instruction of Jesus Christ. The master of the Savior. And then I was thinking about it. It was very interesting because what we have learned is that humility, everything is about humility. But that way, not can teach us about the faith, the practicality of faith. So it was very interesting. But I was thinking about Pastor Adeyemi, I was thinking about it. That was very strange. And that really so much what you talk about the positive that is deposited in between these and them. And another thing I also read about dividends from the unseen spirit. And that author was talking about the unseen spirit as what you imagine, what you cannot see, but you imagine, and then bring it to life in relation to what is obvious to everyone. So I'm just thinking about it, just to say that's what I'm talking about. That was just maybe to explain myself. So my question is there a technology of using or of knowing or reflecting, when we talk about self-awareness, of self-awareness or self-reflecting on positive that are deposited between this and that? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Prof, please, the audience can see. Thank you. I can see you're smiling.
Yeah,
Too many questions.
No, it's not too many. Thank you. Thank you. Actually, at the beginning, when people were not responding, I was afraid that when I teach here, I teach a 50-minute class, and at the end, I ask any questions, and nobody raises any questions because they wanted to go to the next class. I always joke with them that maybe I've made myself so clear that you don't want to ask me any question. That's the story. I usually tell them that's the story I tell myself, but fortunately you listen to me and ask questions, and I'm very, very grateful for that. These are important, very, very important questions. A lot of them we will not be able to answer definitely, but I can make suggestions. If I could start with Professor Ogunbo Dede, our former VC, I believe, if I'm right, immediate past VC, if I'm right. Yeah, I can.
You're okay. Right.
Yeah, let me start with him. Actually, I'm glad he's the one who asked those questions. You see, he spoke like an institutional leader. So he knows how institutions work. He knows how we complain. He knows how we talk. He knows the kind of questions we ask. One thing I also want to join his question to Professor Bello, the Dean of Education, at the same time, because these are institutional leaders for us. One thing they can help us do is to revise governance instruments of governance and instruments of evaluation. How do we evaluate work? How do we evaluate productivity? How do we measure? How do we reward productivity? They cannot do it alone as leaders, but they can begin to ask us, or when some of us ask them, those who are still working their way up, when they ask those questions, we give them a lot of attention. Give them serious, we don't just dismiss them that they don't want to work, but that they want to work in a new way. We are talking of how to measure productivity, how to reward it. What are the parameters? Not just where you publish, but what you say. Who are you talking to? I did a degree in education English at that same university, IFE. But it was easy for me to switch to literature and English after I finished, after my NYSC. There was no question. I switched from education English to literature and English because those who were in charge then believed that what I learned in the Faculty of Education was going to be useful. Actually, it was really, really useful to the kind of literary critic and cultural critic that I became. But if the person who was in charge is a big man at Harvard now, Professor Lupona probably knows him, who made that decision that time at IFE, he's a comparatist. He knows that you have to open up boundaries. When I approached him, just to give a personal example, when I knocked on his door, I was on NYC in Modakeke then. I knocked on his door, I said, I want to switch to literature. He said, okay, go bring the essay you wrote for the project on literary criticism in literature department. And that's all I did. I don't even remember the argument I made in that paper. He read it and I said, sure, you're in. He got me in based on what I wrote then. And he knew I was coming from education. That's the kind of openness. Look, people say that the road, and I tell my students here that the shopping mall to which there is only one road leads. If you open a shopping mall and only one road leads to that mall, my friend, that mall is not going to thrive. That shopping mall is not going to thrive. A good marketplace must accept many roads into it. Many roads must lead to it. You go to the marketplace to shop, to lose your fortune, to make your fortune. But you need to give the people the chance to come in and either make or lose their fortune. We cannot guarantee you are going to make your fortune here, but we'll give you the chance to come to give it a shot, as Americans say. So that's the first thing I would suggest, so that we revise our governance policies, our governance instruments. In my department here, just to give one more example, it used to be that to get tenure, you must write a book, physical book that shows up. If you don't do a book with a university press, you will lose your job after 6 years. What did we do 10 years ago? We revised that because you saw that university presses were closing down. What we did now, we now created what we call book equivalent. That is a series of articles, and it was well defined. It's not just everything goes. A series of articles about which you could find a common theme, a theme that joins them together, that if you push them together, they will amount or even will not be less than a book-length monographic work. That's how we move gradually away from monographs or to monograph equivalent. So at every institution, again, I've never headed a university. I've only headed a department. It's only from that experience that I can talk that we need to renew our governance policies always, every 5 years, every 10 years, so that we can follow up, we can keep up with what is going on in our fields of study. Another question is how do you rise? How do you choose what to study? I think that was from Professor Bello. How do you choose what to study? What perspective? Well, It's a give and take world. It's a give and take world. If you invite me to join your project must be willing to concede to me the perspectives I bring from literature or from genetics. There's something called geophysics. I understand there's something called soil mechanics. The biochemistry, actually, every chemistry in biology now is all chemistry, as you have it now. That's what I heard from my what my colleagues in biology tells me. Biology is essentially all chemistry now, even in the sciences. So what started as an interdisciplinary thing is actually has now changed the character of the original discipline itself, such that you now do environmental biology, you do plant biology, you do molecular and cellular biology, and each of them is essentially chemistry. So if you come from chemistry now, nobody in biology will say, oh, no, he's doing chemistry. The most serious advances in medicine come from other disciplines. They come from, and the same that's why I gave the example of literature. What is showing our artists, our writers, they make profound statements in their works that we need to be reading closely and listening to. Then the question about artificial intelligence, I hope I'm not missing this. The question about artificial intelligence, what can we do about it? Well, I think it's positive. So-called artificial intelligence is going to reshape our world. It's reshaping it as we speak. That's why I see it in one of the reasons I'm able to speak in my study here in Ohio and speak to the audience in Ife, to my colleagues in Ife, in real time. And these exchanges, and somebody is recording it. Some bots, some machine is recording it, taking out the keywords, or mixing and matching it, and sampling it. So we cannot avoid sampling. Again, as a shout out to the book I mentioned earlier by my friend and colleague Akin Adeshokon, everything is sampled. That's the essence, that's the core of artificial intelligence. Everything is sampled, not just Ashake's music, not just Fela's Afrobeat. Everything is sampled. That's the world we live in today. Whether you like it or we do not like it, as long as we show up at the doors of digital technology, we are being sampled. If at the genetic level, at the molecular level, we are being sampled daily. You give blood at a hospital, you don't know which machines, you don't know which hospitals. They take your X-ray, they take your blood sample at Seventh-day Adventist in Ife. It's being read by someone in Bangalore, in India. And your sample has traveled. So what we can do is absorb the spirit of this openness. I'm not from Ibadan. That's why I like Ibadan. It absorbs. It takes. It's a model city that I think we should think about in the way it refines and redefines itself constantly. I think I've missed. I might have missed.
One more question.
Recognition for work. Again, you should fight for it. You should fight for it. Unlike this Ibadan musician, I think is it's Odolaya Aremu, the Ilorin poet, who said the reason God created the next household is so that if they don't like you in this household, you can go to the next one. Ijoy was just joking in Yoruba. Said you fight for recognition, you are going to be punished, by the way. Let me be clear on that. I'm not asking you to be reckless. If you are going to fight the institution is going to fight back, and your body is going to be disciplined. That's why they call it discipline. You will be disciplined. So if you don't want your body to be disciplined by the institution, then just follow toward the line. But if you really want to improve the discipline, from the leader to the lowest person in the institution, we have to fight and keep fighting for change. If you don't fight for change, we will die. as institutions. We will die. And people will bring in their prescriptions to us. Prescriptions, and prescriptions that have nothing to do with the reality of our ground. And they will keep imposing it on us every time. We must be willing to learn. We must be ready to learn. The last person that spoke, the audio was not quite good, so I didn't get the questions quite right. But I think I've addressed the main themes. Especially listen to what Professor Ogunbadede said earlier. Listen to what, I hope you took notes on what those things he listed. Listen to them, analyze them, and see what you can get out of it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof. We can't thank you enough. We have been translated. Thank you very much, Prof. Now we know that we have got the cultural session. Then we have a good photo, which is saying from this afternoon. This afternoon, I'm in the days ahead. Inexpressible. It's been so in the last 7 years. This is the 8th year. And it's been wonderful. I missed us here. I don't know. I don't have enough English words to express or describe the intelligence. Just forgive me. I'm going to run through the names of some facilitators and then we'll come out for a quick photo. I'd like to acknowledge, recognize, thank, appreciate our facilitators. Some of them are here seated and then our guests. We are not able to mention all names, but know that you are all recognized. We thank you very much for your time. Professor Kemeroti is here. Professor Tony Akitonide, Professor Simeon Ilesomi, Professor Afe Adogame. Afe Adogame will be taking the next session. Professor Afe Adogame, don't miss it. Professor Tunde Becker, Professor O.A. Shuande, Professor Douglas Guthrie, Professor A.K. Makinde, Professor Lee Opaloye, Pastor Dr. Badekeshi, Tracy Carter, you are here. Mary Castillo, Dr. Adewale Adelaku, Dr. Daniela Abalajobi, Professor Femi Mimiko, Professor Ngozi Emelama, Professor Litayo Adeshina, Professor Kende Tayo, Professor Theodora Bello, Dr. Ashaulu, Olubumi Ashaulu, Professor Ajani, Professor, that's he's from sociology, Professor La Peju Esima, and so many others, too numerous to recognize. We value you. We thank you all. Fellows, you are excited to be here. We're still going to be having very stimulating sessions. Let me call and not do his work for him as we round off this session. The one to give the vote of thanks, and that's Professor Tunde Becker. Professor Tunde Becker, are you here? Please come. Thank you. Please, immediately after the vote of thanks, please let's come forward for our photo.
A distinguished audience here, we thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank on behalf of the convener and his wife. I want to thank the convener and his wife. You've been a father and mother to us. We are very grateful. And we thank you for bringing us back here to teach us and then to also feed us. The food is very important. And we also thank Professor Simeon Daniel, who is represented by Professor Communication and working. So, and the keynote speaker, we are very grateful. We are very grateful to you. You said something that went in my head. It says, you said nothing is to be rejected in advance and not belonging to what makes from this earth. We thank you so much for all the so many statements you made and very profound. We thank you for so retired. Everybody be a very good yourself. Always happy you and a good yourself. Thank you very much. And really thank Professor to bring because I hope she's still learning. I was speaking myself that if this institute were to be a profit-making organization, should be one of the major shareholders. We thank you, man, for coming around. And then we thank you for the friends from all over the world. We are very grateful that you're here. We're grateful that those who are new to our also with us. We're very, very grateful to what to fellows. You're going to have a wonderful time, I promise you. In 2017, when I was a fellow, it was an incredible time. We thank all the faculty, the very senior faculty. For our information professor, I conducted the Sunday school service this morning before the main service. We thank you all the professors, Professor Okoye. We thank you so much for always being with us. Very grateful in you and all the professors and our fellows in usually wonderful to me. I'm sure you're going to enjoy yourself. Thank everybody for coming. Those online, we are also grateful for your presence. Thank you very much. We hope that the next session we will hold very soon. And we're grateful for your early presence. Thank you once again. Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience. I thank you, Professor Taiwo Shonero and Professor Odigide for this session. I will be going for the photo session right now, and we have just 4 sets of photo groups that we'll be taking together. So let me just quickly get us something about this. Faculties and faculty members take photo session. Then fellows will join them. Then after that, fellows alone will take their own photo session. Then if you have alumni around here, you can also photo session. And after that, we can have 1 more session. Remember, we said that the elevator pictures session has been postponed to this evening. So, but Tanzania is ready for us, and we'll show it to us when we get so we will take the picture just at the staircase outside there. So you can just follow and move, go around the room, and we're taking runs. Thank you so much.